And man, it is a hot day in Mississippi again, and I've got a refreshing story for you today, pun intended. Joining me in the studio is Chat Phillips. He is the founder of, and I didn't even ask you how to pronounce it.
It's Inaka Tea Company.
Yeah, wasn't going to try that one.
Yeah.
That all started with a simple sip on a hot day, probably just like today, but in the countryside of northern Japan. So that is pretty darn interesting. Alrighty, I think people are going to love this story. They're always up for trying new things, particularly when it's made in Mississippi by a Mississippian. But this may be the first thing we've had on the show that was inspired in Japan. Okay, so take us back to Japan. What happened? Set the stage for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a college student, I went to actually college on the West Coast where we were essentially forced to take a foreign language. So I didn't know anything about Japan, wasn't really interested in Japan, but just picked it from a list, picked Japanese from a list. And so I studied it for a couple of years and got pretty good at it. So I thought, in my junior year, let's use
the language.
The language, yeah, Japanese language. So in it would have been the fall semester of my junior year is when I decided to finally go to Japan and practice my language skills. So I don't know if any of the listeners or know anything about Japan, but the climate is almost exactly like Mississippi. It's very hot, very, very humid, and I was traveling there in August. So, I'd been on the plane for like 30 hours or so. I actually stopped in Tokyo, then took another little puddle jumper to the northern part of Japan in a prefecture called Akita Prefecture, which is a very beautiful place and it's very rural. But when I got off, I met my host family, and I was, just drenched in sweat, had all my clothes with me that I was going to wear for the next 6 months while I was in Japan. And they passed me a drink. And, as a Southern guy, I just thought, they did the research. They're giving me sweet tea. And I took a sip, and it was like nothing I had tasted before, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was, as I came to later find out, mugicha, which means barley tea in Japanese. And I thought, man, this is just great. And I drank it all summer long while I was in Japan. And
do they serve it over there like we do tea here? Like if you go out to eat or you stop at a cafe, is it like just part of their culture, just intertwined in their everyday?
For sure. It's not uncommon to go in a restaurant in Japan and even Korea and China to have like a pitcher of barley tea just sitting on the table to pour at your leisure. And then, of course, they sell it in vending machines, grocery stores, all over the place.
Do they have like black tea like we're accustomed to here? There's also?
Of course. Of course, it's less sweet than what we're used to. Yeah. But, Korean tea's big, barley tea's big, black tea's big. It's a big tea drinking culture.
Do you know any of the history maybe behind the barley tea? Does it go back super far there in Japan?
Yeah, so the earliest history we know of it is it's about a century ago. And the earliest recordings we have say that actually Japanese generals used to drink like a mixture of barley and water to keep themselves like hydrated and energized actually in the battlefields. So it's got that kind of history. Barley was actually the original grain that was grown in Japan pre-rice, interestingly enough. So barley kind of predates rice in Japan.
You wouldn't think that. Considering everything says rice over there, capital
exactly.
of the universe.
Exactly,
over there.
And barley actually has a little bit of a longer history. Now, of course, most barley in the world is actually grown in North America.
Okay, so now you're going to have to describe barley for us, because I feel like most of us listening to Good Things, I think we know it's a grain, but it's not something that maybe all of us purchase when we go to the grocery store, although it is becoming more popular in sort of the health food sections. And then there's some of you who have been eating barley for years, and you're completely used to it, but it is catching trends. So, but how do you describe it as a grain?
Yeah, so I would say the closest analogy I could give is if you think about wheat. It's a very similar, it almost looks the exact same when it's growing. It's a very small seed with a husk that's very kind of hearty feeling. And it's about the size of a smaller coffee bean, I would say. Most of the barley that you find in stores is going to be something called pearl barley. It's going to look very small and round. Ours is actually a lot different. It's still whole. It's not kind of ground down like the pearl barley is, and it actually still has a husk on it. So if you think about it, barley, most people drink it, but it's in the form of an alcoholic beverage called beer.
Well, I was just going to say, okay, so the process of making barley tea, is it similar to the process of making beer minus the fermentation?
So it's a little bit different, and it differs in a couple of key ways. One, and this is where we really took a long time to get started going, because our actually raw material is not really readily available in the U.S. So the difference between barley tea and barley that you use in tea and barley that you use in beer is the barley that we use is unmalted. You use malted barley in beer, you use unmalted barley in roasted barley tea. And then, of course, you just roast it like a coffee bean
Would it be from the same supplier?
So we actually do use a supplier that supplies the craft beer industry, and we did that just because they have contacts in the barley world. So it's grown the same way, but it just doesn't go through the malting process. We skip the malting process and we go straight to the roasting process. Yeah.
And if you're just tuning into Good Things, you are listening to Chat Phillips. He is the founder of
Inaka.
I'm going to get that right, but it's going to take me the whole hour.
That's all right.
But I'm going to get a chat. And he's bringing barley tea to Mississippi, which I think is pretty dadgum cool. Okay, so you came home. How long were you in Japan?
So I was in Japan for the first time for about 6 months.
For 6 months, studying, just doing your thing.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was just general education. While I was over there, we were taking like economics and politics and things like that. But it was mostly just an excuse to get to Japan and use Japanese language. Yeah.
And then you came home.
And then I came back to college in Washington State, and then I graduated in my senior year, and I felt kind of a strong pull to come back to Mississippi. Obviously, there are not a lot of Mississippians who speak Japanese, so I was looking to use that skill in the professional world. I landed on an economic development job, actually, in Tupelo, Mississippi, and did economic development there for about 2 years at a place called the Community Development Foundation. Very great organization. I loved working there. Then I went to economic development at the state level. I worked for the Mississippi Development Authority for a number of years, mostly just recruiting Japanese companies to the state. Then I went to work in the private sector to represent companies coming to the U.S. But during all that time, I was going to and from Japan probably 2 or 3 times a year, and I was always bringing my stuff in my suitcase with barley tea.
I feel like that's a moment to pause for parents who are listening. I mean, like, if your kids are interested in learning other language, that you never know when that kind of skill can come in. I know you've morphed into entrepreneur and now you're a tea maker, and that's why you're on Good Things. But I'm thinking, wait, let's not miss that moment for parents to hear. Like, if your kids pick up languages, it can be a phenomenal way for them to get job opportunities later.
Absolutely. And
I've never thought about that.
Sure.
Like in terms of economic development, needing a translator more than anything,
exactly.
right?
And one of the things that was most important, I think, for my job is like, there are people who speak Japanese and there are people who speak English. There's not a lot of people who speak Mississippian and Japanese and English. Having to translate between rural Mississippians to Japanese executives, which, hey, I grew up on a family farm in rural Mississippi. I'm not knocking rural Mississippians. They're the best people in the world.
But we have our own language.
There's an old language here, right? Exactly. It's not particularly easy from a foreigner's
And you can sit down and do good business over a tall glass of cold tea.
You can, absolutely.
But you can make your visitors feel at home, and then you can serve them up something from their home place, which would be barley tea. Okay, where in the sort of story though, Chat, did you say, you know what, I'm missing the barley tea? Maybe it's time for me to see if I can't bring it to the South.
Absolutely. So as I was going to and from Japan for work, I would always pack my suitcase with it, like I said, and I just could not find barley tea anywhere. Sometimes you can find it in Asian grocery stores in the Southeast in the tea bags, but it just wasn't the same. Yeah, so I would actually go to stores, and I just thought, you know what, forget this. I'll learn how to do it myself. So I'd go to stores and buy out basically all the barley they had, and I would just roast
that was the pearl barley.
The pearl barley, yeah. So I would just roast it in the kitchen, like over my stovetop, and actually, like, you could smell. So I was doing it so frequently, like, if I was roasting barley, my fiance would, of course, come over and eat dinner sometimes. And as she was driving up to my house, you could smell it from around the block because it was so strong. But I would sit there and I would just roast barley in my kitchen, and then I would make tea for it, not really thinking that anybody else would want to drink it. I just made it for myself, and it's just such a great, summer beverage, and Mississippi gets really hot. And then I started giving it to my fiance, Stevie, and she sort of fell in love with it. And then at a certain age in Mississippi, as it happens, your friends start getting pregnant, and it's caffeine-free. So a lot of our pregnant friends were requesting it. And so I thought, I really didn't see myself as an entrepreneur.
That is not the way I thought your story was going to go. But hey, that is what Good Things is for.
Exactly.
Us pregnant ladies, not that I am, but I have been twice in August. And I'm like, yes, you want cold, uncaffeinated beverages.
Exactly. A lot of our friends were cutting down on coffee, and they just wanted something that wasn't, water. So I would make it for them. And actually, a lot of the inspiration for our 2 flavors, the ginger and the mint, came from some feedback that we have from our friends and giving it to them in the early days. So at that point, I was just really making it for friends and giving it to them, and thought, you know what, this is a really great product, and I loved it, and I think more people should drink it. So I just started making it and
that's the next phase to Chat creating
Inaka Tea Company.
Inaka. You have to hear you say it, and then I can say
right.
it, and then Inaka. And we're going to find out the meaning behind that and what he's got to offer. Coming up next, explore a little more. We are exploring barley tea today on Good Things. Joining us to continue his conversation is Chad Phillips. He is the founder, CEO of Inaka.
Inaka, yeah, you got it.
I got it, which is a barley tea company made right here in Mississippi from his time of, I guess, just falling in love with the Japanese culture and spending time over there and enjoying their tea and then bringing it back here. Okay, the name.
Yeah.
It's got a special meaning. So what's the message behind Inaka?
It does. So Inaka is a Japanese word, obviously. It actually means a couple things. It means kind of like countryside, hometown, place of origin. The reason we chose that name is, I wanted to give the company a name, obviously, that kind of meant something, but I wanted it to also be representative of both where I tried the tea and sort of my background growing up in rural Mississippi. So we kind of landed on Inaka as a tie between those two things. And plus, it just looks cool on the bottle.
It is cool, and that's what I said. We don't have to know how to pronounce it correctly to find it on the shelf and sort of enjoy it. And definitely don't let that hinder you from trying something new. Rhino and I both are going through all the different flavors, which we will get to. You have brought us cold versions, which I'm assuming is what's sold in stores right now in Mississippi.
That's right.
But someone on the text line asked, can it be served warm as well as cold, or I would say hot, I don't know about warm, or both ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not uncommon, especially in Korea, but also in Japan as well, to drink barley tea hot with your meal. So if you were going to take one of our bottles and heat it up, you can just do it straight on the stovetop, or you can just put it in a cup and microwave it. Both ways work fine for me. Yeah.
So when you started your business, you're like, okay, I'm making it for all of my pregnant friends. And I assume other people are enjoying it too. It is very refreshing. I will completely attest to that. And I was nervous. I'll have to admit, I thought it was going to be because it was barley. And like Larry and Jackson says, it sounds like beer. I was afraid that it was have this sort of flat, beer taste, kind of like those non-alcoholic beers that some of us pregnant women did, chug down to during the hot days of summer while expecting. But it doesn't. I mean, it's surprisingly refreshing. But you said it was some of this is due, the quality is due to the fact that you are able to roast it maybe or steep it or make it differently than if we were to just do it ourselves at home. So what's special in the process?
Yeah. So I think first we should just kind of walk through what it is. Yeah. So basically you take a barley seed and you roast it just like a coffee bean. You don't go as dark. You kind of get it just a little brown so it's nice and caramelly and nutty in the smell. And then we set that aside, and then we actually roast corn along with it. And the reason we add corn to that is really twofold. One, it's because that's how my host family served it to me when I was in Japan, and I just kind of fell in love with that. But it also adds a little bit of that like caramelly sweetness to it that you get when you drink our tea versus maybe some other barley teas. It gives it a lot more complexity and sort of roundness to the tea. So we take those two roasted grains and we steep them very warm for a very long period of time. It's like 3 hours.
It's a lot longer.
It's a lot longer than you would at home.
Yeah, it's not
for
sun
example.
tea.
Yeah, no, not at all. So we steep it at a hot temperature. It's not boiling. For a long period of time, and that allows it to kind of extract, obviously, to the fullest, and it kind of leaves back the bitterness. That's why our tea isn't bitter at all. A lot of times, if you like brew barley tea at home, you boil it, and that kind of contributes a little bitter note to it. So
I could see where that would also maybe hinder someone from trying, thinking it would be bitter. And I think I guess I have had maybe other teas that do have that sort of bitterness. And you're right, it definitely doesn't. So far, my favorite is the mint one, completely refreshing. But you do have the ginger one, which, hey, I'm not knocking it. Rhino loved it. So what inspired the mint and the ginger of all the flavors you could have gone with? Are these traditional too?
No, they're not actually. As far as I'm aware, we are the first company in the world to blend barley tea with other flavors. There were a couple things that inspired the two flavors that we have right now, and we're always trying new things. One is that we just thought the mint and the barley just really married well together. I think the mint brings out a lot of the chocolatey notes that are in the barley, and the barley kind of complements that. It reminds me of like mint chocolate when you drink the mint version. The ginger, we wanted something that, well, like I said, we were giving it to a lot of pregnant people at the time, and they wanted something that had ginger in it because it was, it has a lot of what do you call it? Anti-nausea.
Yeah. Being pregnant will do that to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the beginning.
Anti-emetic. There, wow. Learned a new word
our
today.
Google, yes.
Yeah, learned a new word today. And actually, the ginger one, if you look at our 3 bottles, the ginger one is much lighter in color, and that's because it's only made with roasted corn. And the reason we did that is because, for one, a lot of people have gluten sensitivity, so barley does contain gluten. So we wanted to make something that people who had celiac disease, for example, could drink and have no issues with. But it also, the lighter color and so the lighter flavor profile really helps the ginger shine. And I should say we have 3 flavors available currently. So we have just an original unsweetened version, a ginger roasted corn version, and a mint with 6 grams of organic cane sugar.
And I have to say, someone did also ask, would sugar help it? They're not completely sugar-free, other than maybe the original.
So the original and the ginger
1
are sugar-free. And actually, the sugars that are in the original and ginger, they're just naturally occurring sugars.
But not sugar-free in the terms that you have put artificial sweeteners or anything like that in them. Y'all, it doesn't need it. Wouldn't you say that, Rhino? I mean, I know y'all know I'm a dietitian and I'm always getting you riled up about drinking unsweet tea anyway. And I genuinely have an affection for just unsweet tea. So that helps. But I feel like it definitely doesn't need it.
No, it's got that subtle sweetness that you get with unsweet tea from just the tea itself. But the thing that sticks out with me is after just one sip, you feel like you've just drank a whole cup of water and hydrated.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is going to be a silly question, but I feel like you're the tea nerd to ask. So forgive me for the silly question. When I think of tea, I think of like leaves that you're steeping or whatever. That's what we're familiar to. When I think of coffee, I think of roasting. So how is this a tea and not a coffee? Is it because there's no caffeine? I don't know.
There's no caffeine. Well, so actually the name barley tea is just a direct translation of what the word is in Japanese. So mugicha literally means barley tea in Japanese. So we just translated it into English.
So I got more complicated.
You were overthinking that one. You were way overthinking that one.
That's okay. Call me out for it because, and I think that's also what limits us sometimes here in America and Mississippi or the South or whatever. We get so used to putting ourselves in boxes when it comes to the things that we enjoy or try or branch out. And we think just because we're Mississippians and we like our tea sweet that comes from, the black tea, whatever, that we won't like it. And that's not true. You can keep both in your rotation at home. Like you can still branch out and try new things.
Absolutely. And actually, you might be surprised. I think a lot of our biggest and most loyal customers are folks who work outside all the time because it's such a So in Japan, you actually drink this as like a summer cooler. It's like Rhino. Is that your name? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Rhino. It's like you said. In Japan, it acts as like a natural cooler. A lot of people think of it as kind of the summer drink. So a lot of people in Mississippi are drinking it when they're working outside all day, things like that. The people who buy lots of cases of this stuff are generally people who are working outside and drinking it when they're hot.
When you say cases of it, then that means your business obviously is successful. On some level, you convince folks to put it on their shelves,
Yeah,
which I think, it's one thing as an entrepreneur to have this idea and you love your product or your beverage and your friends do, but then it's another thing to like connect with a community who doesn't really know you personally.
Right.
So how did all that start? I mean, because then you got the bottling and everything else. So I'm sure it was step by step. But when did you know that maybe this was, okay, this is going to work?
Well, I would say it was a very long process. So I don't know if we mentioned this. This is actually the first bottled barley tea company in the United States. So we really had to build the supply chain up from scratch. And that took about 2 years for me to find the barley, to get it roasted correctly, find somebody who knew how to brew it and things like that. But actually, that part was not the hard part for me. The hard part was I didn't know anything about the beverage industry, and I didn't know anything about working with retailers. Thankfully, we do have a number of really great local retailers here in Mississippi. Our first contract was with Corner Market, which is based in Hattiesburg. Right from the gates. I mean, we didn't even have a product at that point. We just kind of showed them a sample bottle, and they said, yeah, we'll buy some.
That's cool.
They put us on the shelves in 6 stores immediately, and that really helped us get off the ground and kind of provide some sales.
And people bought it.
And people bought it, yeah.
Which I'm always surprised with. I mean, because we get in our routine, we go into the store, we buy what's on our list. We're in a rush. Some of us aren't ones to branch out and try new things. But Corner Market, as well as some of the other specialty grocery stores, they have that great wall of things to try. I'll have to say, Bubba from Meridian texted in a chat and said he just ordered the variety pack to try from your website.
Okay, cool.
And so with free shipping. So so I think that's, y'all should support, a Mississippian and a local business and try it. I mean, what does it hurt? You have free shipping, you try something new, you have a conversation about what you're drinking, and what cool way to say I'm drinking barley tea, and then you never know.
And I should mention, probably the easiest way to find us. So like I said, we're available in 6 corner markets in Hattiesburg and Jackson. We just got into Kroger across the state and actually in eastern Memphis earlier this year. And you can find us in like the Discover Local section or by the sushi. And, of course, we're sold online as well by the case.
All righty. Well, we've got more with Chat coming up next about his products with Inaka.
Yep.
I got it.
You got it.
Barley tea and more. Mississippi app. And man, after a hot football game or sitting out there or tailgating, you need a refreshing beverage. Move over. Coffee. Although I don't know. I want my caffeine, and we'll get to that. But we're continuing our conversation with Chat Phillips, who has created Inaka.
There you go.
Inaka. I don't know. Why can Southerners not speak Japanese? I wonder why this is so difficult. It doesn't matter. If you want to look at it, it's Inaka. And is that your website too, correct?
It is inakatea.com.
And I know several of you on the text line, Pamela in Biloxi as well as Bubba from Meridian, have already looked into it. And, we just encourage you, number one, to try something new, but to support a local business in unique ways. And it takes a lot of courage to start something from scratch and try to create a market in a market that's, very stubborn on the way that they enjoy their beverages. I mean, and we are. I mean, and that's okay. We like our sweet tea or unsweet tea or traditional teas here in the South. We like our coffee for our caffeine. But it's okay to just branch out and try something new. So did your parents think you were crazy, Chat, whenever you decided to branch out and make barley tea for a living?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, they thought I was a little crazy. I had a pretty good job. I was a consultant. I was traveling all over the world. I was doing fairly well. And, as soon as I came up with the company idea, I quit my job and started working on it full time. So yes, my mother would kind of slyly ask my wife, like, hey, how's the company doing? How's Chat doing? What's going on with this? But I will have to say, my entire family, my father, my brother, once I decided to kind of throw myself into this, they were super supportive. And they both sort of work in small businesses as well. And so it's been really great to go to them for advice and kind of counseling on how things should go. So I call my dad on a pretty regular basis and ask him questions about, accounting and bookkeeping and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's been good.
Well, I think, that part of the story is important because we all sometimes have great ideas, and not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur and start businesses from scratch. But I just love hearing those who choose to here in Mississippi, and you're like, you know what? I didn't know the bottling industry or the whatever, and so I educated myself, or I put one foot in front of the other. So you don't have to know it all to sort of start seeing your dream come together. You can just start with what you do know and then start sort of piecing that together.
Yeah, and honestly, I had never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I never really aspired to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to work for myself. I kind of always knew that about me. But I'm not one of those people who, when you think of an entrepreneur and you think about entrepreneur culture, you see people like wearing T-shirts and jeans and like being very charismatic and being these huge risk takers. And I never really characterized myself as that. But what I was good at, and I think one of the things that is very important, is I loved and was good at learning things. And when I found a problem, I really wanted to solve it. So the fact that, for example, this barley wasn't available in the U.S., and it took me 6 months to find it and get it roasted to my specifications, and that kind of thing, I think, is really important for starting your own business.
You hear these stories, Chat, of people like traveling all over the world to find the perfect coffee ground or the coffee bean and all of this, and what a dangerous market, and these really intriguing, storylines to it. Is it the same with barley?
Actually, the nice part about barley is that most of it comes from North America. So our barley is sourced actually from Canada and the U.S. Same with corn. So no, I didn't have to go very far. I stayed.
Man,
yeah,
I was looking for a good adventure story
Aztec
with that.
tombs or anything like that. No.
That's okay though. But it is it bottled and all right here in Mississippi? Or are you keeping it home?
So we would love to do that. Right, we had to lean on a tea brewer located out of Texas for our co-packing. And the reason we needed to do that is one, we have to comply with all FDA laws, and we wanted to make it safely. So we did that to start. We would love to well, that was also the quickest path to market for us because, we were going to do a brewing and bottling facility in Mississippi. That'd be a couple of $1 million that we just didn't have, and we wanted to invest our time and energy into getting into retailers. So the goal is for us to kind of build up a good sales footprint, and then hopefully we can start.
For sure, and the more of us who support the Mississippi product, the more opportunity it'll be to sort of bring it here. So if it's bottled in Texas, are you in multiple states now, or is it still just here in Mississippi?
So right now, we were actually really held back, as you can imagine, by COVID restrictions. So yeah, really. So our plan was actually to launch in March of 2020. And I had quit my job, just gotten married, and bought a house. And so that just didn't happen, right? We couldn't go to new stores. We couldn't do testings or demos or anything like that. So we launched in October of 2020 on a smaller scale. And basically our distribution footprint is West Tennessee down to the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. The goal for the next year is obviously to expand into other states, and we've hired some folks to help us do that. Nothing in terms of like firm commitments yet, but that's kind of the long-term or the midterm goal. Obviously, the long-term goal is we want to be nationwide in every store around the corner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. And it seems like from your website, it is kind of like a lifestyle that you're trying to sort of, the slower place of life, the little nostalgia, hospitality, which is so interesting to me that you found that in Japan.
Yeah.
And it ties right back to your hometown community here in Mississippi.
Sure.
And while we speak entirely different languages, there's still so much in common about our cultures, at least at the core.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say when I came back to Mississippi and my first job was in Tupelo, one of my biggest roles was kind of helping with the Toyota employees and their wives and sort of integrating them into Mississippi life. You would be surprised how close like our value systems are in Japan and Mississippi. Hospitality is obviously very, very important in both societies. Like if you go to Japan, it's not uncommon for them to invite you to your home and eat food with them, much like we do in Mississippi. And just, generosity and their giving spirit. I think a lot of Japanese folks, and I think a lot of Mississippians as well, if they have the opportunity to go to Japan, are just really shocked at how similar we are in that value system.
Yeah, and rice and tea.
Exactly. Yeah.
and now we can add barley tea to our list. And there's some that are just tuning in, so they're anticipating where they can find it throughout the state. And so if we don't want to go on your website and sort of do the variety pack like Bubba did, or we want to go in and maybe get it from our Kroger or a corner market, where did you say it was in the store?
Yeah, the easiest place to find us would be corner market locations in Jackson and Hattiesburg. Kroger across the state. So in the Kroger, you're going to look for us in the sushi section typically, or in the Discover Local section. We're in about getting close to 20 Kroger locations across the state. And then we're in a number of independent grocery stores in just various towns.
So is the three products you have here, the ginger, the original, and the mint, the only thing that's in the stores, or do you have something you didn't bring today?
That's it. In terms of beverages, that's it. Of course, you can buy merchandise and things on our website, but yeah, right now it's just the three flavors.
I think you need a blueberry.
Think you need a blueberry, huh? We've experimented with different flavors. I would say
the mint's refreshing. I don't know why I feel like you just need need a blueberry.
I think blueberry would be good. I think that's a good thought.
I'm telling you how to live your life.
Yeah, exactly. One of the funny things is like when I was kind of blending in my kitchen and things, sometimes fruit and like the roasted flavor doesn't really go that great together. So we experimented actually with we had some dewberries that grew on my dad's farm. So I just ground up some dewberries and mixed it in with there, and it was so gross. Believe it or not, because like the acidity and the roastiness like just didn't go together. So
did you ever in your wildest imagination, Chat, when you were starting college or a young boy here in Mississippi, think that when you were, I don't even know how old you are, but you can't be that old, and you're probably your midlife, that you would be making barley tea from Mississippi?
No, I had no idea. Well, first of all, I thought I was going to be a lawyer when I was in college. So obviously
terrible idea.
Yeah, so that got derailed pretty quickly when I started looking into what an actual lawyer did and realized I didn't want to do that. Lots of paperwork. So no, I mean, I never thought that would be, well, I'll say I grew up like a lot of people in Mississippi on a farm, so I grew up around food. So I knew I've always loved food. I've always loved the food industry and kind of the food world. So it was always kind of a dream of mine to work in the food industry. But no, I would have never guessed that A, I'd own my own business, and 2, it'd be a barley tea company.
Someone asked, is it gluten-free? The barley ones are not, but I'll let you take a...
Yeah, so the barley, of course it contains gluten naturally. We brewed the ginger version with just roasted corn because we wanted to make something that was gluten-free. And we're experimenting with new grains all the time. So hopefully we can come up with a version that sort of mimics the barley with some other grains that are gluten-free.
All righty, remind us the website.
Inaka, INAKA-Tea.com.
Chat, this has been so much fun. We look forward to having you back on Good Things whenever you got the blueberry to try.
Absolutely.
I will say cheers to the mint. If you're nervous about it, go for the mint. You can't go wrong. It is truly refreshing. But stick with us. We've got